But this is what this Green Goblin figure is called. The origin of how I came across this figure is a little fuzzy, admittingly. I can't remember if my mom brought it home by itself, or if she bought it with something at a yard sale, or if they threw it in because they were trying to get rid of it. I can't remember. But I legitimately remember it being loose, didn't come with any packaging, except surprisingly, it did come with some of the accessories involved here, and as you can notably see, it is in fact the Green Goblin from Spider-Man. However, which exact line of comics, cartoon, animated series, you name it, is it specifically from? There's really no telling. This is in fact a 6-inch figure, and as you can see, it's gotten like a grounded yet still somewhat stylized but also gritty, very murky interpretation of the Green Goblin, but still staying to its roots of how that Green Goblin caricature came to be in the original comics and even the 90s animated series with the face sculpting and the design overall. So the green and purple is still coming across fairly well on the whole entire ensemble here, but as you can see, the costume is a bit more padded, a bit more armor-like, but it also still looks like it's stitched up on its own, but it still looks like something that was put together by Norman Osborn after being exposed to the chemicals. So there's definitely something very special about this figure. For one, I just love the overall heft and feel to the figure itself. I like that the proportions are a little exaggerated to say the least, whether it be the sizing of his hands and feet, specifically the feet. Look at that. Green Goblin got big feet. You know what that means.
Hello, my dear.
But it's also just the overall texturized feeling of the suit and the overall body as well, especially the shoulder pads, the chest area, going over here towards the back. The whole aesthetic just kind of repeats onto itself. But I just really dig this Green Goblin suit to almost to the point where I really wish it was in fact used to a capacity in either a cartoon series or even in live action form. I know that pulling off a face like this in live action is a little bit of a stretch and may not translate 100%, but I want to see them at least sort of try. Just kind of like how that test footage from the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man was gonna go in favor of that much more comic and animated accurate Green Goblin look. And though I'm really digging the suit, the sculpting of the face is really what does it for me. It is absolutely, it's almost statue grade sculpting that's going on with his face. You got the eyes kind of dilating in different measures, the sculpting of the face, the grin, the nose, even the ears, along with that hood that again still has that stitched up look, but also still looks like something kind of murky and strapped together by Norman Osborn. It really sells the character and the personality behind this big green menace. And along with that, you also have some added details to kind of sell the look and give it some authenticity. Specifically these two bags right here that are likely being used to hold his pumpkin bombs and other accessories. My only gripe is that I don't know if it came like this or if maybe during the handling over the years I might have goofed and flipped it all the way around, but this bag you can clearly tell is on backwards or inside out. And I've tried a number of times to try to see if I could flip it by moving the arms and kind of, moving the head and bending it a certain way to see if I could take it out and put it back in the right way. But every time I do so, I risk pretty much tearing up this rubber strap, and I don't want to risk that. So I'm just going to have to leave it there and have my OCD be triggered. But thankfully, the bigger, much thicker, and more embroidered bag that's over here on his right is put on the right way, so I'm at least happy with that. Posability is pretty standard but still very serviceable. You got of course the arm joints that are slightly hindered by this shoulder pad piece right here, but it sells the look and overall feel of the figure, so I'll take that. It can also kind of move inwards and outwards, except it's just a tiny bit stiff, but there you have the verticality of the arm. Does bend at the elbow at one joint, exactly 90 degrees due to the sculpting of the pieces, but the hands themselves could rotate 360 degrees. One rather stiff joint here in the abdomen to at least allow some twisting of the torso itself, and then of course you have top ball leg joints that allow the legs to go forward that far, but only about that far back because they do the butt sculpting, as I like to call it.
The butt sculpt.
As you know, they have that very faulty butt sculpt where it kind of limits the movability of the legs in the backwards pattern. But over at the knees, you actually have another 90-degree angled joint to bend at the knee right there, with a knee pad to kind of indicate where that separates, along with a parted swivel joint there in the thigh, and then another one here in the shin to then separate the leg and rotate 360 degrees, as well as an ankle joint to allow pivoting forward and back as so. And that's the thing, is that with the joints allowed here, as well as the very big feet, as I mentioned before,
Hello, my dear.
posability with this guy is really well done and very founded. You know, there's some clear foundation here so that you can make sure that this figure is not going to topple over too much. The only issue that I specifically have is that some of these leg joints, especially the ones in the ankles, are just a tiny bit loose, but that comes with the mileage of the figure. This figure is quite literally 18 years old, so over the course of that time, it has in fact kind of where it worn out a little bit of its joints, that a little bit of looseness is going to be found. And of course, we can move on from posability and articulation without mentioning the head joint articulation, whether it be the neck area that does have a 360 degree joint there for rotation, but then on top of that, it also allows a little bit of movement up and down, except that when you do move up, you can clearly see right there that a little bit of the sculpted part of the neck and the actual piece where it connects to the body kind of becomes a little separated, thus showing this rather huge bulge. Now, granted, you could argue that adds to the monstrosity of the Green Goblin itself, but it is a little bit of a flaw within the design of this figure. As you kind of move his head a little too far up, that tends to show. And then they even added a little bit of a ball joint here on the back for this piece of the hood itself, where you can rotate it 360 degrees, as well as kind of slightly adjust it up and down. And that's mainly there to just kind of give a look of aerodynamicy to the figure. So for example, if it's kind of moved down below right here, it's kind of in a neutral shape, but whenever you move this up, it looks like he's taking flight. Why does he look like he's taking flight? Well, that's because a Green Goblin figure is not exactly a Green Goblin figure if you don't in fact have the glider. This is the glider thrown in with the Marvel Classics 2003 Green Goblin figure, and similar to the figure itself, I love the style of this glider because it takes two major inspirations. You have the actual mechanical look of a high-tech glider, while at the same time kind of retaining a little bit of that gothic nature of that armor padded suit that he's wearing in this version, where you do have that turbine there in the middle to kind of again indicate the technological prowess of Norman Osborn's advancement in robotics and sciences. But also you have the bat wings, you have the bat symbol there on the front to illustrate this sense of this haunting nature of the Green Goblin that he's always had. So that really comes across very well on the glider itself. Granted, you could argue that in toy form it does feel a little flimsy, but the reason for that being is because the joints as well as the pegs holding the wings together to the center piece are slightly loose and small, so that you have adjustability of the wings themselves for posability. So say for example we have the glider in this stance right here, you take his rather enormous feet, and another thing that the feet does a good job at is making sure that it clasps fairly well into the glider itself via these pads right here. Simply just fill it in at the toe line and then clasp it in via the heel, and there you are. Goblin is hooked up to his glider, and then adjusting these different wings gives him a sense of posability to make it seem like he's flying, especially with that added adjustable hood piece. Yeah, it definitely looks dynamic and cool, and there you have it. Now there is an additional feature to the glider itself, and it's a little bit of a hidden feature, albeit in, if we're talking realistically, it doesn't really make all that much sense, but pressing the little turbine piece here does launch a missile hidden within the bat symbol here. So pressing it will then cause it to then flip out and be sprung forward. Now, unfortunately, due to, again, the actual age of this figure, after 18 years, the spring inside has kind of worn and torn its way into not giving it enough oomph to launch the missile. So only if you're using the form of gravity, maybe it'll launch forward a little bit better, but as you can see, pressing it simply just gives it that little, it's almost like the glider itself is having performance issues. So this doesn't really happen all that much, but from time to time he does have tend to have performance issues, so forgive him for that. You know, it's not his fault. It's not his fault. And the glider for the Green Goblin goes hand in hand with at least one pumpkin bomb accessory. Here it comes in the form of a bomb legitimately looking like just a pumpkin with a jack-o'-lantern face, except he's got this beautifully scripted fire trail right behind it. Now, it's a little difficult to pose him with the pumpkin bomb because as much as I love the look of this bomb itself, the only real way to place it on him is to, of course, use the open hand, which also leads me to another wish list type thing that I wish I had with this figure, is that maybe some additional hands to kind of swap in and out so that you have one class, one held in together, one look like he's pointing, and another one where he's holding a bomb in a different position rather than just this one. But I digress. If you ever want to pose him with the pumpkin bomb, simply by placing it right there is how probably the best way to pose him with the bomb is. And as you can see, it's a little fidgety. You're gonna have to play a little bit with it to make sure that you're balancing it, because it never really clips into place. It just kind of rests there. So kind of putting him in this stance is probably going to be your best bet. The title of this figure had always escaped me. For the longest time, I just called it like my secondary Green Goblin figure, or this other version of Green Goblin that I just happen to have in my collection. But this is what this Green Goblin figure is called. After doing some research and going across various eBay pages, Amazon pages, even looking back at my original review that I did all those years ago on my original channel, this is actually called the Marvel Classics 2003 Green Goblin figure from the folks over at Toy Biz, which are very much experienced in making Spider-Man figures in the past, predominantly by themselves or based on the movie licenses. It looks like they're doing another bang-up job here, so there you have it. This is the Marvel Classics 2003 Green Goblin figure revisited after all this time, and to be honest, for a very estranged find, whether it be from a yard sale, wherever it is that my mom got it from, it's honestly one of my favorite Green Goblin figures that I have in my possession because of the robustness and the unique look of the Goblin itself, to the point where if they ever bring this version of the Goblin to live action, this is kind of what the design and the look of the character itself I would love for it to be. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to drop a like or a dislike. Make sure to comment below if you guys do have this figure and what's your take on it. Check out the video showing up on the screen right now if you guys want to see some more figure, Spidey, or Batman goodness. And as always, stay safe and stay humble. Peace.